Have you ever noticed how the traits you despise most in others are often the very qualities you've spent your entire life denying in yourself? How the man who infuriates you with his arrogance might be holding up a mirror to your own disowned need for recognition, or how the colleague you condemn for his weakness might be showing you the vulnerability you've buried under decades of performance. This isn't coincidence. It's projection, one of the psyche's most sophisticated defense mechanisms, and one of the most reliable signs that your shadow is speaking through you before you've learned to speak with it. Carl Jung understood that every human being carries a shadow, the repository of all the qualities, impulses, and potentials we've deemed unacceptable and exiled from conscious identity. These aren't just our vices. They're often our unclaimed virtues, our disowned strengths, our unexpressed vitality that we learned to hide because showing them threatened our survival or belonging. The shadow doesn't disappear when we reject it. It goes underground and operates through projection, the unconscious act of seeing our own disowned qualities in others and reacting to them there with a disproportionate emotional charge that has everything to do with the civil war still raging inside us. Today we're examining 5 unmistakable signs that you're projecting your shadow onto others, not so you can feel ashamed of this universal tendency, but so you can begin reclaiming what you've exiled and stepping into the fullness of who you actually are. 1. What it actually is and what it isn't. Projection is the psychological process by which we attribute our own unacknowledged feelings, thoughts, or characteristics to other people, experiencing them out there rather than in here, because recognizing them as our own would threaten the carefully constructed identity we've built. This isn't lying. Projection happens below the threshold of awareness, which makes it so powerful and so difficult to detect in ourselves. When Jung spoke of the shadow, he wasn't describing bad qualities we need to eliminate. He was describing a structural feature of the psyche, the inevitable result of consciousness requiring differentiation, which means some aspects of our total self get emphasized while others are relegated to darkness. The crucial misunderstanding is believing projection is only about negative qualities, when in fact we project both our disowned darkness and our unclaimed light, the aggression we've repressed and the confidence we've denied, the neediness we've buried and the tenderness we've armored over. A man who learned that anger meant violence might exile all his healthy assertiveness and boundary setting, then spend his adult life surrounded by aggressive people while he seethes in silent resentment, never recognizing that what he calls their aggression is the clear spine he's never allowed himself to develop. Another man who learned that vulnerability meant weakness might exile all his natural sensitivity and ability to ask for help, then find himself judging others as too emotional, never understanding that his contempt measures his own disowned need for connection. This is the gold in the shadow, not just socially unacceptable impulses, but vital capacities we rejected because they didn't fit the narrow channel of acceptability we navigated as children. Projection protected you when you were small and had no choice but to conform, when expressing certain parts of yourself threatened your attachment or safety. The boy who learned to hide his exuberance, bury his fear, or suppress his creativity made intelligent adaptations to impossible situations, and the fact that those adaptations now constrain your adult life doesn't make them shameful. It makes them obsolete. 2. how it appears in ordinary life. Projection shows up in the texture of your daily reactions, in the pattern of your relationships, in the repetitive friction points that follow you from job to job like a signature you can't stop signing. The first sign is disproportionate emotional charge, when your reaction to someone's behavior is significantly more intense than warranted, when you're still thinking about a minor interaction hours later, when you feel contempt or rage in response to qualities that don't actually threaten you. The colleague who mentions his accomplishments triggers hot irritation. The friend expressing uncertainty compels you to fix him. The stranger grunting at the gym occupies more mental space than makes sense. This disproportion is the shadow's calling card. The emotion is real, but its source isn't the present person. It's the exiled part of yourself that person is unwittingly representing. The second sign is the specificity and consistency of what triggers you. If you're consistently surrounded by people you consider arrogant, the shadow might hold your own disowned need for recognition. If you repeatedly notice people you view as irresponsible, the shadow might guard your exhausted longing to rest. If you're perpetually irritated by controlling people, the shadow might conceal your own desire for influence. You don't project randomly. You project specifically onto qualities that represent what you've had to kill in yourself. The third sign is enantiodromia, psychological positions flipping into their opposites when held too rigidly. The man who prides himself on being rational and never angry might find his controlled civility is itself a form of aggression enacted through withdrawal or cold correctness. The man who identifies with being independent and never needy might organize his entire life around ensuring no one sees his vulnerability, which is itself extreme dependence. His sense of self depends utterly on maintaining the appearance of not depending on anyone. The fourth sign is repetition across contexts. You keep having the same conflict with different people, keep being disappointed by the same behaviors in different relationships. This isn't bad luck. It's your psyche trying to bring shadow material to consciousness through external encounter because you won't meet it internally. The fifth sign is fascination mixed with judgment, when you're not just irritated by someone but oddly captivated, unable to stop thinking about them or monitoring what they're doing. That magnetic quality signals shadow material trying to return to consciousness. You don't give sustained attention to things genuinely foreign to you. You give it to disowned parts of yourself seeking readmittance. 3. Origins and the boy who stayed. Your capacity for projection was forged in your family system, where you learned which parts of yourself brought you love and which cost you connection or safety. Every family has an emotional economy, unspoken rules about which feelings are acceptable and which forbidden, and the boy you will learn to read this with survival-level precision. If your father's rage was terrifying, you learned anger is dangerous and exiled every impulse toward healthy assertiveness. If your mother's needs were bottomless, you learn to be the stable one who never needs, exiling your vulnerability so thoroughly you now see it in others as weakness. The boy who became you made implicit contracts. If I show excitement, I overwhelm mother, so I'll be calm. If I show fear, father disapproves, so I'll be tough. If I compete, I might lose their love, so I'll be selfless. These weren't conscious negotiations. They were adaptive responses that helped you survive childhood. The tragedy isn't making these contracts. It's still living by their terms decades later, still exiling the same parts to maintain a coherence that no longer serves you. The adult armor you developed shows up as personality structures you identify with. The achiever who can't stop performing. The intellectual who lives in his head. the caretaker who can't say no, the stoic who maintains perfect control. These aren't who you are. They're strategies you develop to manage who you are. Underneath every strategy is the boy who still holds the keys to your vitality, still carries the qualities you exiled, still wants to bring them home. If you found value in understanding how projection reveals your shadow and how recognizing these patterns can help you reclaim the parts of yourself you've exiled, subscribe to this channel to continue this work of integration. Also, if I may ask, if you feel strong enough right now, share your experience with the shadow in the comments below, not to boast about, but to prove to yourself, I've made the first step. Thank you. 4. Contact, containment, and integration. Contact with your shadow happens through moments of recognition. The sudden uncomfortable awareness that the quality you've been judging in someone else lives in you too. These moments come through honest conversations that mirror your patterns, through persistent feelings that won't go away, through dreams, or through pausing when you feel disproportionate charge and asking, what in me is this person representing? A useful phrase, this reaction is older than this moment. When you feel contempt that's too sharp or rage that's too hot, that phrase creates space to separate what belongs to now from what belongs to then. Once you've made contact, the instinct is to immediately express it, to start acting out the qualities you've repressed. This is where containment becomes crucial, not repression, but the vessel that allows something to transform before it expresses. You need to sit with the uncomfortable recognition that you contain anger, ambition, neediness, sexuality, whatever you've been projecting, without immediately acting it out or making it everyone's problem to process. The difference between clean and dirty expression is everything. Dirty anger is 30 years of rage exploding at your wife over a reasonable question. Clean anger is saying no clearly and defending a boundary calmly. Dirty sexuality leaks out as compulsive behavior. Clean sexuality shows up as aliveness and presence without shame. Dirty ambition manipulates from the shadows. Clean ambition straightforwardly acknowledges you want to build something significant. The containment phase is where you learn the feel of the clean version, where you practice internally before expressing externally. The path of continued avoidance means you keep projecting, keep having the same reactions, keep wondering why patterns repeat until you're 60 and realize you've spent your life performing a version of yourself designed to please people who are long dead. Your relationships remain superficial because you can't be intimate with others when you're not intimate with yourself. Your leadership remains limited because you can't guide others through territory you haven't explored in yourself. The path of integration doesn't promise ease, it promises wholeness. When you reclaim the qualities you've been projecting, you become more present because you're not defending against half of reality, more flexible because you have access to wider responses, more genuine because you're not performing an identity requiring constant maintenance. The man who integrates his disowned anger discovers he's calmer because he's no longer repressing a fundamental human capacity. He can set boundaries cleanly, creating a spine of self-respect. The man who integrates vulnerability discovers he's stronger because he's no longer organizing his life around the terror of being seen as needy. He can ask for help straightforwardly, creating depth of connection that's been impossible. The real gains are in presence. You develop a calm backbone, centered clarity from no longer being at war with yourself, warmth with spine that's only possible when you've stopped splitting the world into acceptable and unacceptable parts. You stop needing others to be different so you can feel comfortable. Your relationships deepen because you can see people accurately when you're not projecting your drama onto them. This is individuation, not becoming perfect, but becoming whole, becoming conscious, becoming capable of living as your full self. 5. Archetypal framing and brotherhood. The work of recognizing projection sits at the center of mature masculine development. When caught in unconscious projection, you operate from immature archetypal forms: the tyrant king who demands conformity, the sadist warrior who attacks what he fears in himself. The king in fullness requires you to integrate what you've projected, because his essential functions are ordering and blessing, and you cannot bless in others what you've cursed in yourself. When you integrate projections, you stabilize the king by ending internal rebellion, bringing exiled parts back into conscious service. The warrior's capacity depends on clear perception, and projection ensures you're fighting shadows, defending against threats that aren't real. Integration frees the warrior to respond to actual challenges, to use aggression cleanly rather than leaking it through passive-aggressive patterns. The magician governs transformation, and the man who integrates projections becomes his own magician, catching himself in the act and using that awareness as data for self-understanding. The lover represents connection, and projection kills love by ensuring you're never relating to the person in front of you, but to your own internal drama. Some of this work requires solitude. Decisive turns in consciousness need privacy, depths of self-confrontation that can't happen in others' presence. But solitude is for decisive turns. Brotherhood is for endurance. You need other men doing this work who can witness your process without fixing or judging, who can hold you accountable without shaming you. The pattern of unconscious masculinity is isolation disguised as independence, itself often a projection, disowned neediness showing up as contempt for those who ask for help. The mature position recognizes transformation happens in relationship, that you need mirrors to see what you can't see, that brotherhood is about bearing witness to each other's becoming. The refrain, not perfectly, reliably, you will continue to project. Everyone does. The goal isn't elimination, but catching it sooner, recognizing its field more quickly, integrating what you discover without shame, building enough relationship with your shadow that projection becomes information rather than unconscious compulsion. The work of recognizing projections and reclaiming your shadow is the work of becoming whole, of gathering scattered parts you exiled to survive and bringing them home now that you're strong enough to hold them. This isn't comfortable or fast, but it's the only work that leads to genuine freedom. Freedom from repetitive patterns, from performing a partial self. Freedom to show up with your full humanity. The paradox is you become more solid by becoming more complex, more reliable by acknowledging your contradictions, more yourself by accepting that yourself includes everything you've insisted you weren't. Your invitation: begin noticing the disproportionate charges, consistent triggers, repetitive patterns, fascinated judgments. Let them become data rather than truth. Ask what quality that person carries that you've exiled. Sit with uncomfortable recognition before trying to fix or express it. Hold it in the vessel of your awareness long enough to transform from poison to medicine. Not perfectly, reliably. This is how you become the man who can hold the full weight of his own being without collapse, who can bless others because he's stopped cursing himself, who can lead with clarity because he's ended the civil war within. Be that man. Not perfectly, reliably. Begin. If this exploration has given you insight into patterns running your life from darkness, and if you're ready to continue this work of integration and wholeness, subscribe to this channel and hit the like button. It helps tremendously. Thank you.